Procrastination. Every one of us would have procrastinated at a certain point in time, right? In fact, more than 95% of us procrastinate, says Dr. P.S. Steele, who is a pioneer in research about procrastination and who is also the author of this book called Procrastination Equation. And in fact, recent statistics also reveals that almost 80 to 95% of the college students procrastinate at certain level, and 50% of them consider to be as a problem that negatively impacts their social, personal, and academic life, and especially academics. So, is procrastination really bad, and is it really detrimental? Not exactly. We aren't worried about procrastinating a couple of minutes a day. Instead, we are more worried towards the chronic procrastination, and when that severely and negatively impacts our productive lives and hence our performance as well. And before getting any further, if you're new to the channel, hello, this is Nawin. I'm currently a third year medical student at CMC Vellore, and welcome to the channel. So, what is procrastination and how is it actually defined? We as humans have been procrastinating since ages, and it's actually a human behavior. In fact, ancient Greek philosophers like Aristotle and Socrates have coined a term known as akrasia to describe this behavior, which is the state of acting against your better judgment. So as of your better judgment, you know that you're supposed to do something more important, but instead of doing that, you're doing something more enjoyable and something more pleasing, which is definitely and obviously not more important and not more significant than the actual task that you're neglecting. And that's what in modern words we call it as procrastination, which is the act of delaying a task or a set of tasks, and that's moreover an irrational delay. And in order to understand how not to procrastinate, which will be a complete separate video where I'll be talking about the scientifically backed tips and tricks that you can actually apply into your daily lives to completely get rid of this habit of procrastination, which will be a complete separate video as I said in our channel. Understanding of why do we procrastinate and the science behind it is crucial, and this video is going to be all about it. And even until I started preparing for the content of this video and the research that I did behind this video, I wasn't completely aware of the fact that procrastination is still not a clearly understood concept even till now, and its psychophysiology is much more complex than we actually think. But still, I've done my best in putting in the time and efforts that's needed, and I've looked into a lot of research articles and research papers in order to give the best content out of this video as much as possible. And out of all the theories and models that explain the mechanism of procrastination, the two significant models that we are going to talk about specifically in our video is going to be the emotion regulation model and the temporal decision model. So firstly, coming to the emotion regulation model, which states that procrastination is a form of a self-regulatory failure which is associated with a variety of personal and situational determinants. So personal determinants being a motivation and dedication that you have on a particular task and your cognition or what you think about the particular task, and situational determinants include certain task characteristics and the temptations that you have around your environment. So that will be an environmental factor. And when we talk about the task characteristics, which also comes under the situational determinants, that include three important task characteristics. So firstly is task aversiveness, that is how aversive a particular task is or how undesirable a particular task is. Of course, most of us are going to perceive studying or writing an assignment as more aversive rather than playing a video game or watching a movie, right? So that's task aversiveness. And secondly, we have the future incentive or a future outcome that particular task yields. And thirdly, it's time delay or the time that is required to attain or to receive that future incentive or future outcome. So that's about it, and this is what emotion regulation model says. Now moving on to the second model, which is temporal decision model, which I find it quite interesting, and this talks about again two important characteristics that directly influences procrastination. So one is going to be the task aversiveness, as I just said, and secondly we have the future incentive or the future outcome that particular task yields. So this temporal decision model predicts that people often procrastinate when the task aversiveness of a particular task outweighs the utility of the future incentive or the future outcome that particular task yields. And this kind of perception or this kind of behavior or ideology that a person will have during the initial part of the task. Let's say for example, you have an assignment or you have a test which is scheduled on the day 10, right? So during day 1 and day 2, what happens is you perceive the task aversiveness as more concerning. That stops you from actually doing that particular action or doing that particular task, and hence you procrastinate. But what happens as the days progresses and the deadline approaches, irrespective of whether the task is aversive or not, you are actually going to end up in doing the particular task, because in that case often you perceive both comparably, or in fact most of us consider the utility of the future incentive or the future outcome that particular task yields as more important, and that helps us to stop procrastinating, and that leads into action. And this is why often most of us do a particular task only 2 to 3 days prior to the deadline. And in fact, this temporal decision model has also been validated by a recent research that was conducted back in 2021 on a cerebral cortices of 36 participants using an fMRI analysis. And it also predicted that our human brain is more likely to implicate two separate neural pathways to mediate the effects of outcome value and the task aversiveness on procrastination. And in fact, the results also reveal the same. So the results reveal that during an outcome value, or when a person thinks about outcome value, there is increased activations in the caudate, which is a region of the brain, and that suppressed procrastination through a hippocampal caudate pathway. On the other hand, when a person thinks about task aversiveness, there's increased activations in the anterior insula, which is again a region of the brain, and that leads into procrastination through a amygdala insula pathway. So now, in order to give you some kind of background behind this, hippocampus and amygdala, these are two regions of the brain which has specialized functions. So hippocampus is responsible for episodic or declarative memory, and on the other hand, amygdala is specialized in input and processing of emotions. So during any particular emotion response, and here the complex emotional response that we are talking about is procrastination, this hippocampus and amygdala, these two separate regions of the brain, they kind of interact with each other, and that is responsible to translate that emotion into an action. So here we are talking about procrastination, right? So through these two separate neural pathways, which is responsible for thinking about outcome value and the task aversiveness, these two decide the task valuation, and that in turn decides whether a person should procrastinate or not. So that's about temporal decision model. And now I would also like to introduce you all to a concept called time inconsistency, which is a phenomenon or concept that's frequently talked about in behavioral psychology. And I came to know about this phenomenon in an article written by James Clear, and it has also been replicated in multiple research articles that I've looked into. And I'm pretty sure you would know James Clear, right? So he's the author of this book called Atomic Habits, which is a pretty famous book, and that's every YouTuber, when he talks about procrastination or productivity or life improvement, this would come under the top 3 life improvement books. So I'll try to read that book and also put a summary in my channel soon. So yeah, that's about it. Now let's get into the time inconsistency. So time inconsistency refers to the tendency of human brain to value immediate rewards than the long-term rewards. And let's understand the concept of time inconsistency by considering ourselves into two different selves. Let's say we have a present self and we have a future self, right? And often our present self set goals and have plans for our future self, right? But at the same time, we also should realize, and we also actually know that in order to make that plans possible and successful in future self, the present self has to take the necessary action that is needed, right? But often there's a kind of discrepancy or inconsistency between our present self and future self. For example, let's say our present self has a goal to lose weight by the end of 2023, and that's a goal that present self has on our future self, right? But at the same time, research has also found that our present self values immediate rewards and immediate gratification rather than long-term payoff, whereas our future self values long-term rewards. So in your present, instead of acting towards your goal, which is losing weight by the end of 2023, your present self will convince yourself to eat a donut or to eat something more delightful, which is acting against your goal, right? So that action that you do in your present self doesn't lead into your goal of your future self, and that's what time inconsistency is, which leads to procrastination. So we just can't always rely on our long-term consequences and long-term goals and long-term plans to keep motivating our present self to do a particular action. Instead, what we should do is we should find a way to bring that future goals or future consequences into present. So instead of just having a long-term goal, we can actually have a long-term goal and a lot of short-term goals in between in order to keep our present self in the right track, so that we are working towards the right goal on our future self, right? And this brings me to the concept of procrastination action line, which is the most important concept in this entire video, so kindly stick till the very end of the video. So let's understand the concept of this procrastination action line by considering a graph that's plotted against pain and time. So pain here denotes or refers to the negative emotions like stress and anxiety and guilt that is associated with procrastination, and the procrastination leading into action, and finally action leading into our goal. So let's again consider that we have an assignment or a test on day 10, and during the day 1 and day 2, as I said, our present self values immediate rewards and immediate gratifications, so it is much more less concerned towards your long-term goal, that's your test or an assignment which is scheduled on day 10, right? So due to that, your present self procrastinates, and let's say you have a minimal pain, because of course you're not going to completely enjoy the process of procrastination, even though you have a little bit of temporary satisfaction that you just push the deadline and you have pushed your work towards the next day. You'll have a temporary satisfaction, but still there would be a minimal stress and anxiety and guilt of procrastination, and let that be denoted by this line. So now what happens is you're procrastinating for day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, day 7, and then you'll realize that your deadline is approaching and you have lost so much more time and wasted so much more time, and that's when your future self actually becomes present self, and your future consequences and future goals becomes into present and comes into present, right? And that's when you think, okay, this is the time that we should actually put into action, and that's when you have the steep graph where your pain just escalates up and it shoots up like hell. So that's the most difficult part in this entire process, where often people give up even before starting a particular task. But once you realize that you have lost so much more time and you push as much as hard as possible with all that you actually have, and once you just cross that action line or action threshold, which is actually starting a particular task. So that action line or action threshold, which is denoted by the point in the graph, refers to starting a particular task. So once you start a particular task or cross that action line or cross that action threshold, all the pain that it just escalated up is going to come down, and eventually if you consider yourself in the mid of the action and the mid of the procrastination, your pain level will be way more less in the mid of the action, and eventually that will lead you into your future goal. So what we should actually realize and understand from the concept of this procrastination action line is, the most difficult part that we often struggle is just to cross that action line or action threshold, because that's the most stressful part, right? And once you cross that action threshold or action line, which is once you start a particular task, that's when your motivation and momentum is going to come up, and that will help you to continue doing the particular task. But to start a particular task, you will have no motivation. And again, motivation is a wrong concept that often people misunderstand, that people think that you often should feel motivated to do certain things, but it doesn't work so. It's not the motivation that leads us into action, instead it's the action that leads into motivation. So once you start a particular task, then you feel motivated to keep doing the particular task, and that's how often motivation works. The most important tip that we actually should know in getting rid of procrastination, or the habit of procrastination, is just to start a particular task. Even though you know that even if you start now, the task is going to be incomplete, but just start. So that's pretty much it, my friends. And if you have found this video useful, consider giving me a thumbs up, because I put so much of my time and effort into this video. And also don't forget to click that subscribe button and the bell icon so you'll never miss any single video or update of mine. And thanks for watching. See you on the next video.